Revolution. But with social histories turned to cultural history in the 1970s, the ideology of republicanism suddenly became respectable, even to leftist and neo-Marxist historians. Republicanism seemed to offer an acceptable communitarian alternative to the excessive emphasis on private interests and individual rights of liberal, capitalistic America that Hartz had described, an alternative, moreover, that, unlike Marxism, was an authentic part of America's heritage, indeed, central to its revolutionary beginnings. Suddenly, the left had something in the American political tradition to appeal to other than the rapacious, money-making justifications of liberal capitalism. Before long, many historians were appropriating republicanism in order to explain everything from working-class solidarity to ideas of motherhood, from the jurisprudence of John Marshall to the politics of the Jacksonians, from the anti-slavery crusade to Southern secession. Having once been identified, declared Joyce Appleby in 1985, republicanism suddenly was found everywhere. And not just in historical accounts, but in political and legal theory as well. Law professors in particular used republicanism's emphasis on an active civic life and common public purposes to deal with a host of legal problems created by liberalism's apparent obsession with procedural justice, neutrality, and individual rights at the expense of the community and its needs. Anyone seeking to understand the fascinating story of how law professors in the 1980s and 1990s enlisted republicanism on behalf of their legal agendas can find it, spelled out with great verve and clarity, in Laura Coleman's Strange Career of Legal Liberalism. If I were to write this book now, I might do it somewhat differently. I might add some material on religion and political economy, which critics have called for, and which subsequent scholars have more than amply supplied. But I would not change the book's central argument, and I could not make it shorter even if I wanted to. Although I have had requests over the years to turn out a popular abridged version, I have resisted the temptation. Anyhow, I would not know where to begin condensing the text. I have been consoled in my failure by Edward Countryman's too generous comment that the book could not have been one word shorter. If I wrote it now, one subject I probably would treat differently would be republicanism. Since republicanism has come to seem to many scholars to be a more distinct and palpable body of thought than it was in fact, perhaps it needs to be better set in its 18th century context. I certainly know more about the character of 18th century Republican thinking now than I did in the 1960s, and I have described that character in my more recent book, The Radicalism of the American Revolution. Although monarchism and republicanism had different values, they were mingled in people's thinking, perhaps more than I implied in 1969. Classical republicanism was certainly not the besieged ideology of a few revolutionary intellectuals. It was not a body of thought exclusively identified with radical Whigs or Bolingbrokean Tories, with the extreme left or right, or with any fringe groups whatsoever in British and American politics. Republican values were not marginal. They spread everywhere in the culture of the Western world, not just among the English-speaking peoples, but on the continent as well. For most educated elites in the 18th century, monarchism and republicanism often blended and blurred to the point where the two at times seemed virtually indistinguishable. To be sure, few persons talked openly of deposing kings and instituting elective republican governments. Such seditious thought was not only dangerous, it was beside the point. People, even good aristocrats, could be loyal monarchists and still ardently promote republican values. Few of those aristocrats celebrating the humanistic and egalitarian values of Mozart's Marriage of Figaro in the 1780s believed that they were thereby undermining monarchy and their future existence. Monarchical and republican values thus existed side by side in the culture, and many loyal monarchists adopted what were in substance, if not in name, classical republican principles without realizing the long-term political implications.